Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Kind of amazed by modern technology right now. This is the first time I've done this, so um,
Nice.
yeah, I'm just making sure it's recording. Hold on one sec.
Okay.
Uh, let's see. Um, Video call recorder. Yeah. Okay, we're good.
Great.
So I don't know if you remember how this all started. Last year, I was driving my kids down to a volleyball tournament just south of here. I live in Hermosa Beach, and
Mhm.
I listened to your podcast with Michael Gervais, and I had these two little 12-year-old volleyball players in the back seat. And they're like, Mom, you're always listening to this stuff. And I'm like, you guys listen to this. This is good stuff. So I DM'd you and you hit me back. And then I happened to catch your post. Um, I think it was when you said you'd been living with chronic pain for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it struck me, and I started thinking about you again. And I'd been working on the Optimist journal. And just, I thought, what the heck? So I reached out. So I really appreciate how responsive you are on Instagram. It's amazing. So,
Yeah. Sure. That's
um,
awesome.
yeah. So, like I said, I started the Optimist journal a couple years ago. And I'm just really fascinated by mindset and how the way we frame things can completely change our existence, basically.
Yeah, it's the coolest, right?
Right. And to see what you have, like, what you've pushed through and starting at such a young age, I'm pretty curious. Like, do you think, because when you're 9 years old, and I don't know, maybe other people haven't listened to, I'm obviously pretty familiar with your story at this point, but
Hmm.
you're 9 years old and you get this pain in your leg, completely unexplainable.
Yeah.
How do you you don't really have a philosophy at that point. You're just do you how much do you remember about what you thought when you were that young and kind of, not being able to move?
Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting because kids are so naturally resilient in a lot of ways and also really naive in a lot of ways. So I think in some ways that helped me in that, especially when it first started, we didn't know what it was going to be. It was going to be this huge, long, 20-year long thing. Um, the doctors kind of just thought that I had gotten hurt, and I had been hurt before, and so the way that it fit into my worldview at the time was like, oh, I get hurt, and somebody fixes it at some point somehow.
Sure.
They give you medicine or you get stitches or whatever, and then it's okay again, and then you go back to being just as healthy as you were before. Like that was the only thing that I understood. It's like you have a problem, the adults know the answer, um, and so for the initial, I don't know, probably for at least like 4 months or so, I was still very much just a child, kind of going about life and following my brother around and playing with the other kids and everything. I was just doing it on a pair of crutches, which in my mind I was like, this is unfortunate, but it shouldn't slow me down any. I can still move and I can just do it on one leg for the time being, and then somebody will eventually figure it out and we'll move on. Um, I think around the time, probably like 5 to 6 months in, after I had gotten initially diagnosed with a nerve disorder and we had started trying treatments and they weren't working, and it was probably around the time that I started seeing the doctors and understanding that they did not know what to do. Like I could watch their faces and hear their tone of voice and realize like this person doesn't have the answer, and they're the 50th person we've seen and none of them have had the answer. And it was just kind of this gradual realization of they think this is it. This is what it's going to be like. And I had no ability really to comprehend that. Like I remember understanding that was where we were at, um, but I was like, that can't be correct, you know. Um, so so really, kind of the main turning point in my life was deciding the decision, like I'm gonna just do this anyway. I'm gonna start walking, even though there's nobody currently in the world who thinks that is possible. I'm going to try and do it anyway. And even that was kind of built on the naivete of youth a little bit, because it was essentially on a whim. I literally the last week of school was like, I'm gonna walk on the last day of fourth grade.
And were you on crutches? Were you in a wheelchair? How like
I was on crutches. So I was on
okay.
crutches from December through June. So I hadn't put my foot on the ground. Like it hurt me to do that. So
Yeah.
I was, my leg had atrophied and all of that. I was amazing on crutches. I was very skilled by that point.
A lot of upper body strength.
Yes, I could hop for days. But there was I didn't, go to my physical therapist and say, let's figure out the progression and going up to it. I was like, I just didn't bring my crutches to school. That was the entire plan.
Brilliant.
Yes. And up until the night before, I was fine with it. I was like, yeah, this is going to be it. No problem. And then it hit me, and you heard me talk about this on my next podcast, like, it was like, in order to do that, I kind of had to just shatter my own worldview, which was, like I said, as any child, there's a problem, there's a solution, and then we move on. And so in order to do it, I had to understand, like, maybe there is not a solution to this problem of, pain. Like, maybe we can't just solve that and move on, but maybe the solution is that I go out and try this and I can do it. Or I can't, and then I have to deal with that, which is terrifying.
Absolutely. But you basically transcended the pain at 9 years old still at that time? Or?
Yes, I had just turned 10. Yeah.
Okay.
So
and did your parents know? Did your parents know you were working up to this, or was this all in your? Okay.
I had told them that I was going to do it, but and I think we're like, okay, I guess. My parents were very much, they let me make my own choices, but the night before, when I came to this sort of realization and just started sobbing in my house, in my living room, they, I don't remember a lot of what they said to me because I was busy crying, but I remember them sitting there and saying, it's okay, you don't have to do this. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, like, I think that me breaking down and having that moment of, like, being really scared and coming to the realization of, like, there are all these people who don't think I'm ever going to walk again at this point. And I can continue to not believe them. But if I try this, then we're going to find out, right? Like, I can stay on crutches and keep thinking, like, tomorrow I could walk. But if I try it and I can't do it, then that's going to potentially confirm what they're all saying. So I'm dealing with that moment, but it wasn't me sitting there making the decision, I think. It was, I had already made the decision, and this was me kind of coming to terms with it. So when my parents were sitting there going, it's okay, you don't have to do this, I was like, no, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I didn't say that to them. I was like, I've already decided and committed to it, and now I'm freaked out.
Right. So now I'm pushing through my fear, and you're a little kid, but to have that level of realization at that age, I mean, maybe in part because of what you were being confronted with, because a lot of kids at that age haven't had an experience like that. But it's definitely, I'm wondering about, you say your parents were pretty hands off, or they let you make your own decisions. I'm wondering about the mindset. Like, do you feel like you were born with that determination, or was there something in your upbringing that kind of taught you that as you moved along, or more because of the situation with the chronic pain?
I think it's a combination, right? Like, I think I was definitely, I was a stubborn child, and very persistent, and I always had sort of a high pain tolerance. I think that I know that my parents instilled lessons in me, and when I say that they let me make my decisions, they were really good about kind of any decision that I was going to make. They were very honest about what what it was. Like I remember when I was playing volleyball, even they're like, okay, you want to be a great volleyball player. So do millions of other little girls, right? This is what it's going to take to get there, and the sacrifices you're going to have to make, et cetera, et cetera. What do you want to do, right? And then with the pain, it was the same way. It's like, this is going to be really hard. But at the end of the day, it was up to me to decide, to take that information in and decide it. And it's interesting now in my life, because I feel like I make decisions in the same way that they framed it for me when I was younger. It's like, what are the risks? What am I trying to get out of this? And then, is that risk worth it? And if so, that's what I'm going to do. And once I've committed to that, I'm in. So that's when I go back to that moment, it's like, I don't know if I had fully understood the risks when I make that decision, but I was like, okay, here are the paths ahead of me. This is what I'm going to take, and then I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah. So basically, they would expose you, or they'd expose you to what you were going potentially to face, but it was your job to follow through. There was no forcing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the best story, and I told this on Mike's too, is when I was still on crutches, we had a planned family trip to Yosemite.
Mm-hmm.
And on like ski week or something, or spring break, and I couldn't walk, and my parents sat me down. I remember this, and they said, we have this family trip planned. It's okay if you don't want to go. It's going to be a lot of walking around and hiking. There's snow on the ground. I was like, I love snow and hiking and all of these things. I want to go. And then we were there, and I was walking around with them and all that stuff, and they wanted to go on a hike up Vernal Falls, which is not a crazy hike, but for a little kid, it's legitimate, and for somebody with only one functioning leg, it's not super easy. And so again, they said, do you want to go? Let's hike. It's okay if you don't. Mom will stay back with you in the lodge. And I was like, yeah, I want to go on the hike. Yeah. So
I've done that hike. That's no small task.
Yeah. So we hiked up Vernal Falls. And it's really interesting to me because that story comes up every once in a while when I'm talking to people. And I would say at least probably over half of the people that I tell that story to are like, why would you do that? Like, why would you hike up a mountain on crutches? And it's always been the most confusing question to me, because I'm like, why does anybody hike up a mountain? Like, right. I wanted to hike up the mountain.
And that was the way you could do it.
Yeah, and then I had one leg to use and some pair of crutches, and I was able to do it, and so I did it. And it's an interesting thing to me when we talk about mindset and just how you view like your perspective on things, because there are people who look at a child who can't walk, and they're like, oh, you can't possibly do this thing. And it's like, well, but I can. I'm physically capable of moving in a linear fashion, and I can get up the mountain. And yeah, so I think that, but my parents were always like that, of sort of like, you can do it if you want to. It's not going to be easy, but not, I don't know how many parents would even have given their kid the option.
Right. Well, and it honestly, it contrasts so much, because I have two kind of schools of thought on what I see today in parenting. And there's the super overprotective, like, let's shut it down way before, there's not, we don't want to risk it, because, we're going to protect you from the failure, and we're just going to keep you over here. And then there's the super aggressive, you've got to perform to be this, that, and it's all like a society-based definition of success that doesn't have any intrinsic motivation, right? So it seems like your story threads the needle pretty interesting in a really good way, where you had that freedom, but you also had the mindset to back it up. And it's always an interesting, push and pull as a parent. Like, how hard do you push? What do you let them figure out on their own? What what's your job to impart? So
for sure.
Yeah, they seem like it's inspiring. It's a cool story, but you obviously did your part. So,
I did.
So when I listened to another one of the podcasts, and you were talking about playing at Stanford, and
Mhm.
just that progression of, rising to the level of the top of the college volleyball world with this chronic pain. And what interested me there was it seemed like you held your pain pretty close to the vest, right?
Yeah, I did. I didn't kind of all growing up, once I started to walk, I didn't really talk about it much. And in a lot of ways that was a conscious decision, rightly or wrongly. Like I think I always think it's funny because I'm sure that there are like psychologists and psychiatrists who listen to me talk and just like cringe because they're like, you didn't tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
But for me, I think what I really needed once I had gotten to the point where I was walking and I was functional and I had started playing volleyball, that I needed to, like, for lack of a better word, like stand on my own 2 feet, you know? And especially within the sports world, I remember at a very, very young age, like probably, I think I was about 11 or 12, and I was playing and I was at a tournament. It's around your daughter's age. I was at a tournament, and I remember looking around at all of these. You know what tournaments are like. It's just, girls
Chaos.
everywhere,
Yeah.
like whistles blowing, screaming.
Yeah.
My favorite place in the world.
I love it.
And I remember looking around at one point, and I think we were sitting between matches, and my leg really hurt, and I was looking at all these people, and I realized like there aren't other people here like me. Like nobody's probably has this thing that I have, and like what do I want to do? How do I want to deal with that? And I remember consciously thinking like I in this space in this world, and in the gym, like I want to be judged on the merit of my game. I grew up. My mom's a volleyball coach. My brother played. My dad played. Like I grew up loving the game, and I wanted to play it. I remember even thinking at the time, I'm like 11 or 12 years old, and I was like, I want to play this game beautifully. Like I want people to come watch me play and to see something they haven't seen before. And I never ever want to hear somebody say like, "Oh, she's really good considering."
Oh gosh, that's huge.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I remember in that moment even being like, okay, that this is kind of my space away from the pain. Like the pain is going to be here and it's going to affect it, but I have to be able to play with all of these people who are normal. And there were various times in my career that I kind of came back to that. Like I remember a coach one time coming up to me when I was probably 15 or 16 who knew about it. Some of my coaches didn't when I was younger. And she said, we were in a drill or whatever, and she was going to correct me on something. And she said, hey, which leg is it again? And I said, well, tell me what you're going to say, and then I'll tell you which leg it is. Because I have to, I have to be able to make the move. And if I can't make it because of my leg, then I'm going to figure out how not to. But first I want you to tell me what the problem is,
Right.
and not give me the excuse. And so that went through, even through college. Like I would never have like lied about it or hid it if somebody had asked me about it. But not, almost nobody knew, so I was never asked about it. But I also remember thinking about it in college and watching matches where somebody had been, coming off an injury or a surgery or something, and announcers almost make excuses for you.
Right.
Like you mess up a hit and they're like, oh well, her knee. And it's like if I make a mistake on the court, that's on me. It's not on my leg. Even if it does affect that. Like I always want to be judged on whatever I'm doing. And so that was part of it because of the conscious effort. And then the other thing was just that was, I'm not the kind of person who likes to talk about when things are wrong. Again, for better or for worse. Like I think it's probably something I need to work on. But even from a young age, I felt like I have this pain, and when I tell other people about it, it hurts them also because they can't help me. And so I'm just like, I have to hurt and they don't. So I'm just going to deal with it. And it was that way up until I think in college I started learning, like, actually sometimes you just need to say this hurts and tell somebody because that in and of itself helps.
Right.
So I learned that lesson in college. And then the other thing I learned the first time I ever really publicly acknowledged it was I wrote an article I think after my senior season. I really wanted to write something about kind of testing your own limits, and this was the best story I had, obviously, about it. And so I wrote that, and I was really nervous about like making it public. But the response to that, once I understood and had people who related to it or inspired by it, or the one thing I kept thinking when I was thinking about whether or not I was going to release it was, if there's one kid out there like me who this can help, like I didn't have that person to look to. And so it'd be too selfish not to put it out there. And so those are the two things I learned in college and after, was like, sometimes you should just tell people, and then it can help others. Like my pain can help other people.
Yeah, that's the premise of my, how I started my blog was, going through painful things in my life and feeling so held back and wanting to keep things, I'm pretty, to myself. Mm-hmm. And when I did let it out, that outpouring of me too, or, inspiration or whatever it is that you can provide, it's huge. So you made the transition then. I don't want to leave out the national team. I'm super interested about your child. There's so much stuff. I'm so interested about Washington D.C. too, though. So I don't want to skip over that, but at the same time, I don't want to. I want to get to how you've made that transition from the court to the business world, and like what lessons you think that you've learned, from sports that are now helping you today and in business? Yeah.
I feel like everything. I think the biggest thing I think that I took from sports, I remember even before the national team, which is a whole nother level. I remember even leaving Stanford, I had this feeling of like, after everything that sports and being a student athlete and everything, after everything that asks of you, mm-hmm. like, and for me especially, going through this whole process and the pain and all of that, it's like, nobody will ever ask anything of me that is more difficult than what I've asked of myself, like ever, right? And so, which makes it much easier to go out into the world, right?
Yeah, believing in your own strength. I mean, that's the confidence level that has to give you is huge.
Exactly. It's like there's nothing, whatever comes next, I can handle it. But even in a narrower degree, like walking into a boardroom or something where it seems intimidating, it's like I've faced down like giant Cuban women hitting a ball at me. Like I'm gonna be okay, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. It's just the confidence that you've been through some things that are really difficult, and the way you get good at doing difficult things is by doing difficult things. So just already kind of having that step up. I think there's a lot to be said for just having been on teams and understanding how to look at the people around you and first of all just kind of read them and where they're from and all of that, especially having gone from the national team to teams abroad where I couldn't even talk to some of my teammates, and so that's helpful too. And then just understanding that we each have our strengths and weaknesses, and it matters how they complement each other, and it matters where the gaps are. And I was always the kind of player. I'm 6 feet tall, which is
so am I.
Tall.
I used to be tall. I'm a lot older than you, but I can't believe how tall girls are now. It's insane.
Yeah,
it's
amazing.
Tall
for the normal world.
Yeah,
I am not
me too.
Tall in the volleyball world.
Totally.
I actually have like a very skewed self body image, because I think I consider myself like a medium to small size person.
Oh, that's
because
funny.
That's what I was forever. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm a good athlete, but I'm not a crazy good athlete. So I was never on any high level team because I was going to be physically dominant. So one of the things that I feel like I brought to teams was that I always understood sort of the big picture of the team, and I always thought of it kind of as a puzzle. And some players are the big piece in the middle, and there's corner pieces and edges, and then there's almost pretty much always gaps. And so one of my abilities was to understand where the gaps are and to try to help plug different ones. So like maybe on some teams I'm a star player, maybe some teams I'm not, but I can do this, this, and this, and help the team in different ways. Whether that's skill wise, or it's leadership, or it's helping that star player and like keeping her confident, whatever it is.
That's such a selfless way to play. Like, did you ever feel like did you ever have to battle your ego? And when you say like some teams I was the best and some teams, I mean, because that is the true definition of a great teammate.
But yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just being honest with yourself. I mean, I've always wanted to be the best player that I could, but yeah, I go to the national team and I'm not the best player there, right? But there are things that I can do to help and ways that I can add value. And then I was always a very unique player in the sense that I didn't have one position, especially at the higher levels. You don't really see that.
Your story about staying with the national team and moving positions that was awesome.
I mean, and it's so funny because when I was younger, people were always like, you have to choose one. There's so much specialization in volleyball, as there is in pretty much every sport, I think, now, because kids are starting so young. But growing up, I was kind of short, then I grew, and then I was short again when I went to college, and everyone was like, you have to pick one. And I was like, I literally had a very high level coach tell me at one point when I was in college, and I had let's see, I think it was after my junior year maybe, and I had gone from being a DS to a setter and a right side to an outside hitter and a setter. Like, we ran our own kind of unique rotation, and he told me, like, you should go to John Denning, the Stanford coach's office, and tell him what position you're going to play. And I was like, no. I am 100% not doing that. And it didn't, and even if that had been appropriate, which it obviously is not, I wouldn't have wanted to. The only time I was ever unhappy on a volleyball court is when I felt like I could have done more and wasn't able to. If I was setting and it didn't matter because we couldn't get a pass and I could have been passing, something like that. And so if there are 5 different positions you want me to play within one match, because that's going to be the thing that gives us a chance to win, great, let's do that. And yeah, there were parts of me that were like, man, I could have been, like, I really, after my sophomore year, when I finally got a chance to set a 5-1 and be the only setter on the court, I got into the off season and I was like, I want to be the best setter in the country. I want to run my offense. I have all these plans. And within a week, I had kind of drawn out the rotations and realized I needed to hit on the outside. And I was like, okay, well, we're doing that now,
Wow.
But yeah, it's also probably the thing that got me on the national team. I don't know if I would have made it as a setter. Maybe I would have.
Yeah.
Or as an outside hitter or whatever, if I had only strictly done that. But again, that's kind of, I've never understood the game of volleyball in pieces, right? It's one thing, and you flow seamlessly between. That's part of what I love about the game.
Yeah,
is that you can't separate it out. It's offense and it's defense, and it's all these different skills working together. And without any one of them, it doesn't work. And so, so that's how I look at teams in general. Yeah. And so when I go into the business world, and it's the same thing of like, here are all the things we need to get done. Here are the kind of different points that I can plug into, and where my strengths are, where my teammates' strengths are, to look at.
Do you, working in Washington, D.C., I'm not exactly sure like what your day-to-day is like, but do you feel like you're more on the business side and you don't see a lot of the partisan, like what we see on the news, or do you feel like you're right in the middle of it?
I don't feel like we're right in the middle of it. I mean, you'll see until you like go to the train station or something and there's, Make America Great Again shirts up for sale or something, and you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
I live here. Or actually, I was walking down the street yesterday, and some random guy was like, hey, how do you feel about Trump? And I was like, that's an
Okay.
interesting question.
Yeah. Like, why am I going to tell you?
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, so I guess there's that. But largely, I feel like, yeah, I mean, the government shutdown is happening right
Yeah.
now. So
Right.
there are people that we work with occasionally who are out of work. But largely, we deal more on sort of business and media and that kind of thing. So we work a lot with people outside of DC.
Okay. Well, I grew up in a pretty political family. My dad was in office. My sister worked in D.C. For John
Oh wow.
McCain. For quite a few, she worked in his press office, and I got to attend his memorial service, which was
Wow.
unreal, super unreal. But I just have this thinking these days that, we're also driven down our foxholes because of social media. Like, you and I doing an interview is one of the best things about social media. There's other things like, you read an article and then they're going to send you another article that's, sending
Yeah.
you down your train of thought. And I just have this idea that, like, if people are more open-minded, if we could listen more than we talk, that there's a lot of aspects of growth mindset that I think would help a lot in DC, but I feel
Yeah.
like it hasn't gotten there yet. So,
It is not.
as the power structure is not conducive to, and I tell people, 5 or 6 years ago, I quit listening to the news and started listening to podcasts
Yep.
because I find more interesting people out there doing good things, and their mindset is so different.
Hmm.
So, that I would love to see. I'm just trying to figure out how do we get that mindset into that power structure, because I'm, proud American, but like it's tough back there. And
It's really tough. And the thing that's really cool about my job, and so we do a few things, but essentially my company Shift 7 was founded by Megan Smith, who was the chief technology officer of the U.S. under President Obama when he was in office. And so um, they found a couple things when they brought all of these tech people to government, which had never really happened before. And a couple of things that they realized were, one, um, most problems have been solved somewhere. There is a teacher who has solved education, or a jail that has solved criminal justice, or whatever. But not all of the solutions, are coming out of Silicon Valley. Not all of them are, you know, even in America or by white men or whatever the
sure,
issue is.
yeah,
So we need to go out and be able to kind of find these solution makers wherever they are and help scale what the solutions that they have. Other thing that they found is that technology is exploding, right?
yeah,
But
absolutely,
it's being applied to like very specific sectors. It's driverless cars and it's robotics and it's precision medicine. But it's not being applied to justice or poverty
oh,
or diversity and that kind of thing. And so how do we do two things essentially? How do we find these solutions where they are and help scale, and then how do we make sure that technology is being applied across the board? And the cool thing about that, especially over this last year, it's been so divisive and the news is just so disheartening,
right,
is that people that we get to meet are the ones solving things, and
yeah,
they're everywhere, but you never
exactly.
hear about them.
And
And
that's,
so one
I
of the
yeah,
things that we're trying to figure out is like, how do we make that louder and bigger, um, and that's the biggest challenge, because we're so used to having like all of the terrible things thrown at us, and it's like, yeah, but there's this woman in the UK who has created like the next level dumpster essentially that will take all of your organic waste and turn it into water and fertilizer and electricity.
right.
Like,
Like, but we don't know about her, so
that's
let's,
awesome.
right, I could,
Yeah.
like, bring her out here.
Yeah. So that's been like the hopeful thing over the last year for me working with this, is that we try to focus on the solutions more than the problems.
Yeah, which is, I mean, going back to my original premise of being an optimist, and a lot of times I get kickback on, I'm a realist or don't be a blind optimist, but like to me, optimism is so much grounded in hard work, and you know, optimism is what gives you the energy to
Yeah, yeah, you're not
to
sitting here
keep
going,
working,
right, you're
right?
not sitting here going everything's going to be great because it's just going to be great. You're like, things can be great, let's make them great.
Right. And there's a lot of hard work and discipline that goes in behind that. So as long
Sure.
as you're training both, you're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
But well, I did a little research. I looked at your website, and what your company is doing looks really awesome. I'd love to keep drilling down on that.
Yeah.
They because I even went to you said something about the UN Sustainable Development Goals,
Hmm.
and I went on that, just looked those up, and they're so clear cut, and I don't even want to say, like, they're not oversimplified, but there's just so much out there that clouds our minds, and you look at that and you go, gosh, if we could do these things, we'd all
Yeah.
be
Everything will be fine.
we'd be great, right? So
Yeah. And what's cool about the SDGs is that um, that came from the whole world. Like the whole world came together and negotiated a ton, and came up with like the 17 goals for how to make the world a better place, essentially. Um, and so what we do with the Solution Summit, which my boss and our co-founders created when they were in the White House and the UN, respectively, that is just call out to the world and be like, who's already doing this? Who's already got solutions to these issues, and solving for these goals? And we get the coolest things back. Like the lady from the UK was one of them. And it's like people are out there doing awesome things. We had 1,000. We had over 1,000 submissions from 134 countries in 2 weeks,
wow,
and it's like the
that's
coolest
yeah,
stuff. Um, but yeah, it's like this the stuff is out there. We just have to learn about it
for
and
sure,
help.
yeah, absolutely. And how long have you been there?
Just about a year. I started like last December, January.
Okay, very good. Um, well, I don't want to take too much of your time, so
No worries.
want to try to tie this up. But if you could give me maybe what from the outset, like what has optimism done for you in your over your lifetime, that mindset, and how has that helped you frame your challenges?
I think what's really interesting is that, and I don't think I've really talked about this before, is um, I think sometimes about the concept of hope, which is a part of optimism, right? Um, and I didn't have a lot of hope in the sense that you would think when I was dealing with the pain. Like I got to the point where I was like, I have to stop hoping that this gets better because it's hurting me to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like when I don't say that to people because they they get sad, like as if it's a dark thing, and I don't think it was dark for me. It was like I need to stop hoping for this thing to change because I don't know if it ever will. And I needed to do something to find hope in other areas. Like, I don't know currently, like me sitting right here at my age, I don't know if I'm ever going to not hurt. But I do always have hope that I can lead a great life and be happy, whether or not I'm in pain. And I think that's a really important distinction is like, I don't have to have the ideal thing. Like, there are very rarely sort of perfect days, but there are a lot of really great days.
Yeah.
Um, and if I can recognize those as they come, rather than being upset about like the one thing that went wrong, uh, I think that's kind of always been my view on it. Like like I can take the one bad thing or the 1,000 good things, and that's my choice. And so I choose to look at the 1,000 good things, um, and I'll deal with the rest.
Yeah, I mean, you basically rewired your circuit
Yeah,
around your pain, and went
yeah,
to, okay, I have this, but I've got this 1,000 other things, so I'm going to
yeah.
focus on the 1,000 other things,
Right.
and yeah, and that
I had a
takes you,
teammate.
yeah,
I had a teammate one time on the national team who, uh, what was the exact? I'm trying to remember the exact conversation, but Oh, it was before practice in the morning, and she kind of jokingly was like, "Are you excited for practice?" Like kind of like another day on the grind, and I was like, "Yeah." And she did it like kind of did a double take and was like, "Wait, really?" I said, "Yeah, I'm always excited for practice." And she kind of looked at me funny, and I was just like, "I mean, like we're in the USA gym.
I,
I get to play volleyball today. That's pretty much always a good day,
I
right?"
mean,
And like some of them were really, really hard, but they were still pretty good days.
yeah. And the truth is, you're reminding me of one of my favorite quotes. The happiest people like the simplest things. And
Yeah.
granted, you've risen to a really high level, and that's not simple, but just that beauty of, and I think I remember you saying it in one of your podcasts about you were still just a kid playing the game.
Just a kid
I
playing the game.
mean, and that's, to hang on to that for that many years it's a gift, but that mindset it's inspiring.